Hello everybody, good evening and welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I am your presenter Stephenson Worme, and I invite you of course to be with me here until 10 o'clock, and we've got a very important subject matter that we'll be looking into. So let me just quickly say how pleasurable it is to be back here on Beyond the Headlines, hosting the program. It's been quite a while. To think about it, I've been out for about 11 months. And of course, by now, I think the nation knows that I was pursuing medical treatment, of course, in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm back, albeit a bit temporarily, but of course, when you love something, you do go after it. Let me inform you that tonight we'll be looking at minimum wage, and that's a very important subject matter that, of course, has been having discussions not only here in Grenada, but of course throughout the world as a whole. But we'll be zeroing in on what's taking place here in Grenada. Let me first introduce you, of course, to my panelists, and then we're going to get right into the subject matter. Just to my immediate left, I've got Mr. Kenzie, who is the Public Relations Officer of the National Bus Association and also the President of the Grandans Bus Association. And to his left, of course, we've got Mr. Brian Grimes. He, of course, is no stranger to the air at all, and he's President of the Public Workers Union. And we have Mr. Ambrose Phillip, of course, a veteran and an economist, and we'll be hearing from him also, and a historian in his own right. And I'm pleased to announce to the nation that Mr. Ambrose Phillip was in fact my history teacher at GBSS. I don't think he likes to hear me say that, because I think he tends to feel when I say that he's an elderly man, he's too old for that sort of thing. But I'm proud to say that he taught me at the Grenada Boys Secondary School. And a little later on, we'll be having Mr. Lydon, who is the Executive Director of Grenada Employers Federation. He's going to be either in the studio or maybe online, because he had another function that he had to go to. So let me quickly say welcome to these two noble gentlemen in the studio, and then Mr. Ambrose Phillip. Gentlemen, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Welcome, thanks.
Mr. Phillip, good evening. Welcome to you too.
You and the other panelists who are here now, and of course to your viewership.
Right. So let's look a little bit at history as a whole in regards to minimum wage. And of course, if we're going to look at the historicity, it goes back to the 19th century. And two of the countries, of course, that heralded that would be New Zealand and Australia. But of course, the United States of America and the United Kingdom, they played a significant role in regards to the early development of minimum wage emphasis. Then, of course, there was the 1938 U.S. Fair Labor Standard Act, which established a minimum wage of 25 cents per hour. That was a lot, wasn't it? Absolutely not. 25 cents per hour, 1938. But let's bring it right home, gentlemen. And I would start with Mr. Phillip. Mr. Phillip, let's go back to 1930, 1931. Of course, Mr. Marichaud formed that union association back in 1930. And a year later, there were about 10,000 people on the streets in St. George's. They were protesting the increase of taxes, tax bill rather. How much do you think, Mr. Phillip, that influenced that sort of fervor and movement and looking into better wages and people demonstrating against some of the ills in society?
Well, to begin with, you have chosen to look at the historical perspective from a geographic or from a nation's point of view. But I also think that we need to look at the history of minimum wages in the context of the economic development of the particular society. And you don't have situations of minimum wage issues arising in the absence of a measure of what you might call industrialization. And it therefore raises the question of the applicability of minimum wages to rural-based economies or economies that have not reached a very high level of industrialization. And I say this because in the post-1930s period, particularly when the concept of, when minimum wage legislation took off in the Western developed world, we would see that, in fact, these were fairly industrialized and advanced countries. Within the context of the Caribbean, I don't believe that anybody seriously considers the Caribbean to have had a significant level of industrialization prior to the industrialization by invitation that followed the Nobel Prize winner Lewis theory back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, when we were talking about industrialization by invitation. And again, in that context, we were principally referring to the larger English-speaking territories of Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and to a lesser extent, Barbados. If you're going back as far as the 1930s, then one is going to look at the conditions that prevail at the time. And this, in fact, this is the conditions that prevail had given rise to a number of commissions. In our part of the world, I think you had what was called the Mayon Commission, which in fact recognized that the post-emancipation period in this part of the world was one which was characterized by abject poverty. So that is the particular context. Within the United States particularly, the notion of minimum wage emerged, particularly with respect to women and to youth who were employed by fairly large companies. I do not know if one can say that that is a parallel course of development in Grenada. It probably is not. But not only that, I believe that our trade union friends will also tell you that the concept of a minimum wage also arose where not only were workers regarded to be at the mercy of large capitalist employers, but also that the issue of safety issues at work and a minimum wage seem to be tied up together. So much that I would say at this point, for background, I will allow our trade union friends to probably make a comment thereon or to add to that.
Gentlemen, obviously, we talked about that 1931 and thereafter, and of course we had two major unions which were formed thereafter, 1946. Then came, of course, the late Sir Eric Gairy around 1951. Do you think, Mr. Grimes, that the atmosphere in Grenada traditionally and historically has been very strong in regards to the working class and in regards to minimum wage and the seeking to reform minimum wage? Do you think we've had a good history? Has it been impressive or not?
Well, I wouldn't say it has been impressive. A lot of things have happened historically in our country regarding wages, and we refer to Sir Eric Gairy's 1951 revolution, right? In terms of the actual minimum wage, I have learned a lot here from Professor Ambrose Phillip in terms of the historical aspect of it, but going to recent history, contemporary history, not as far back as that, I would say for recent history, we have not placed that emphasis on the minimum wage. The very fact that I can sit here and say that the law of Grenada states that it is supposed to be reviewed on a triennial basis every 2 years thereabout, and the last review was in 2011. It speaks to the fact that we as a country, as a nation, has not put enough emphasis on that minimum wage, that floor for workers in different industries across different sectors. So I'm really happy to see this particular administration taking the initiative to do a review to be implemented in 2024.
We talk about it not having done, and there's such a huge gap before anybody looks into it for reforms. What about unions like yours, for example? Do you think that you have been strong and purposeful enough to push for it and to say, hey, listen, this is what the law says, and we need to get it done?
I would say a resounding yes. Not to blow my own trumpet, but myself in particular, I have spoken out about the need for minimum wage review. And, you know, in terms of the minimum wage, me being the president of a public sector union, one might say, well, listen, the public sector is not so directly affected because most government workers, the majority, operate above minimum wage. So we talk about, when we're talking about minimum wage, we're talking about people probably, you know, in most of the informal sectors and so forth. But there are people within the public sector who fall within that category. And in terms of just interaction with workers, I interacted with different workers within the public sector. I had interactions with caregivers. And then, you know, I understand the importance caregivers have to our country in terms of, you know, taking care of our little children, the seeds of the nation. And when I found out some long-standing caregivers were working for $1,000 a month after 15 years and so forth, I was appalled, and I had to use my position as current president of the union to really speak on it, right? I also used the opportunity, being in the position that I am, to speak about the fact that media workers are grossly underpaid, and I can say in this new minimum wage review that is being undertaken now and about to come to a completion, media workers have actually been included. So yes, I think the unions have done a lot in terms of pushing for the minimum wage review. We are happy that this current administration has actually listened.
I think the last one was 2011,
yes,
was it?
Yes, 2011. So basically it's 12 years overdue or so. Yeah.
Derek, your thoughts about that? 2011, we're talking about 12 years. That is significantly long, isn't it?
It is. And to put it like, to support Mr. Grimes, what he's saying is that we had a long history of setting things on the books but not really enforcing them. From since 2011, yes, they had a change. Now we have a review where we actually would be seeing some changes come from the new year. But saying it is one. I think I would like to, what system that we have in place to say for sure that the minimum wage it will be enforced. Do we have do we have anybody that could that would go around and see that the different sectors implement the minimum wage? Because just saying, okay, yes, the minimum wage by law, you would have to follow it come the 2024, but not having a system in place to see that it's implemented, I think is a bigger concern here, because we tend to, as a population, have a lot of things on the books, and it's just on the books and it's just not happening. So I think that is my kind of concern in terms of that of the minimum wage.
Okay, we're going to address that, obviously. I think we've got Mr. Lydon Lewis online with us. Mr. Lewis, are you there?
Hey, good evening, Pastor Worme, and good evening to all the other panelists. Yes, I'm here for I'm here.
Well, good evening to you and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Is it heartening to you to hear, or to know rather, that there is strong sterling discussion about minimum wage and seeking to ensure that it becomes something into fruition?
Yes, it is. I think the facts speak for itself in terms of what should have happened 12 years ago and the cycles. If it was supposed to be done every 3 years, then there may not have been the margin of increase that may have been proposed. Maybe it would have been more integrated and more strategic, and also more incremental. And so the discussion tonight is appropriate, and the fact that it's been done, as we say, better late than never. So it's all good. There are different aspects to it. There are different paths that the discussions can take, and I look forward to what would ensue in long-term discussion for tonight. I think Master Ambrose has set up good historical perspective, and I was listening, and I was really enthralled by his comments and his historical overview. And as Brother Gimes would have indicated, we have more current and issues to look at in terms of how it would affect our populace and the persons who really need it.
Is this a situation where we can say that somebody...
Let me introduce another aspect of this thing, because my three colleagues who have spoken on this matter have looked at the passage of time, 11 or 12 years since the last review. But I think that we need to take a more holistic approach, or a more philosophical view to the notion of minimum wage. While we're talking about a minimum, there are two other contexts that we seem to have ignored. And that is the question of one, output. What is the other side obtaining for a given outlay? So I am required to pay $9, $10, $12, or $15 an hour. What am I to get in return? The current legislation gives guidelines only in terms of time, for 4 hours work, 6 hours work, a week work, or whatever it is. It says nothing about output otherwise. And if you are going to ensure that there is output in a particular period, then the whole question of supervision comes into play. And it is, in fact, it is surprising that unions have not given any serious consideration to this question of output for a particular wage. That is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is to do with affordability. Yes, 11 or 12 years have passed since the last review, and I remember when Minister Glennis, I think it was, jumped the minimum wage from what it was between $4 and $6 to approximately, but certainly for security guards, it moved from 4 something to 8 something. And in fact, people cut back on the number of security guards which were employed. So we need to look at affordability in the context of where the Grenadian economy stands at this point in time. And I'm talking about the Grenadian economy in the context of the public sector, in the context of the private sector. If you look in the so-called more developed countries at this notion of minimum wage, there is this debate as to whether or not the legal introduction of a minimum wage discriminates against an increase in employment. And when you have unemployment situations as you've had in Grenada, in excess of 20%. I believe I was looking at the budget speeches, selected budget speeches over the past 5 or so years. And at one point in time, I think we were dealing with unemployment rates in excess of 30%. And where unemployment by youths were concerned, or employment of the youth were concerned, we were looking at unemployment rates in excess of 40%. I do not know what the most recent figures are these days. In fact, it seems to me that budget statements are studiously avoiding giving that kind of macroeconomic data. But one needs to look, especially in this post-COVID period. In this post-COVID period, we are talking about businesses trying to recover, right? We have heard talk out of some elements of the private sector that things are not as bright as they thought it was. And yet we seem to be moving the minimum wage in a significant way, I agree with you that some time has elapsed. And in fact, I know that there are friends of mine who will talk about living wage and a minimum wage. And if we are looking at the minimum wage, one needs to ask oneself, what is it supposed to cover? Is it that we are trying to make up for the ravages of inflation since 2012 or 2011, when the last review would have been based on macro and microeconomic data up to that point in time? And I believe there has only been 1 or 2 years since 2014, since 2012, that the inflation rate has been less than 2%. I think there was a budget speech that reported a 1% annual inflation somewhere around 2017 or going back in those times. So if you look at the cumulative impact of inflation over the period of time, one would say that what is being proposed now is inadequate. But then one also has to ask yourself, can the economy, and meaning both public and private businesses, can they afford it? I remember at a time around COVID, you walked into business places and found them empty. And yet you still had staff members crying out for bonuses in the absence of no sales. Well, that's the kind of a paradox, or the kind of unreasonable expectations that we seem to have. So we just can't talk about this thing being due every 3 years, and because it has not been done for 12 years, that we just do it. We need to look at it in a broader economic concept. What is it that people can afford? Now, I agree. Less than 2 years ago, the price of fish was less than $6 a pound. I bought fish in Grenada 2 days ago. It was $10 a pound, although they managed to clean it for me for that price. But is that reasonable? Is this kind of increases in the cost of living or in the cost of goods that we expect the minimum wage to cover? And if it is to cover that, are businesses generating sufficient return or sufficient income to meet that kind of demand? And I think all of us have seen what happens on the roads of our country with the bushing, where there are a handful of people doing less and less every time you see them come out, right? And so in other words, the whole notion of productivity is something that I think needs to be addressed when one is looking at the notion of paying a minimum of X dollars per hour, and not just simply telling me, right, if you're working for more than 4 hours or you're working more than 5 hours a day, your rate is supposed to be 8, 9, 10, 11 or X dollars per hour. These are the broader issues that we need to be concerned with.
It's quite obvious, gentlemen, that employers would be saying, look, this is a huge jump. And there's no question about it. And workers would obviously be saying, we deserve this. We deserve this. With such a huge gap, 11 years, I'm not sure how easy it is to really handle. I mean, in terms of bringing that sort of balance where everybody could be happy, and very rare you get everybody happy at all. But Derek, you talked about the whole idea of monitoring this, and you say that that is a concern that you have. How will it be monitored? Do you get any impression that significant thoughts have been given to that to ensure that when this is passed, that it will be properly monitored?
Yeah, it is a concern, and personally, we have a culture that we pass a lot of things and it's on the books, and we don't have a system in place to monitor it. That is a concern. And what makes us think that come the 2024, that when we expect the rates to go up, or we expect employers to pay employees based on the law, what is stipulated, what makes us believe that that's going to happen? We have a lot of persons that under the pinch. For instance, in my industry, which is transportation, it had moved from $35 a day for that of a conductor to $60.
That's a huge jump.
It is a huge jump. And we have a lot of operators or owners already not operating with conductors. So that's silly that these category of persons will never be able to afford a conductor. Although, to put some balance, that the industry has already gone past that minimum wage. We pay more than that, but that is for a certain category of transportation. Because you would have the persons with the older model buses that really can't afford to pay a conductor because they come and they get maybe 3-4 trips per day and make $100. So how would you afford to pay a conductor $60 from $100, and with the gas price where it is? You would find there's a difference with that of the newer model buses that have these high commitment to make, and people tend to fancy. It's more luxurious and so on. So that's a different category. So you would find the persons that are paid what I would call current wage, because the lift of the wage, the way it is, it makes it current. We don't see it as minimum. We see it as a current wage, because you take a expenditure and you increase it that much. And yes, the industry is paying that, but when you make it the level that is normal, then we don't call it minimum wage anymore. So we call it current wage.
Brian and Lydon, I would like both of you to chime in. We're going to go to a quick break shortly. But would this in any way help our unemployment situation in Grenada, or would it make it more a challenging affair?
Yeah, so let me just say it. This minimum wage, I'll be frank, it's not an exact science. Economics is not an exact science. So there are scholars on both sides of the fence. Some say this is a good thing. Minimum wage increases, it will increase productivity, it will improve morale and so forth. And others say you increase the minimum wage, what you're going to do, you're going to drive unemployment up and drive businesses out. From where I sit, as a trade unionist and as a worker representative, my position is that the minimum wage periodic increases and review is a fantastic thing for the working class people. In regards to this one in particular, Pastor Worme, I can say the committee, the Wage Advisory Committee, has been extremely responsible, because there is that concern outside there that this is not the time. But in terms of business owners and people who are owners of capital, I've never really heard them say this is the proper time. It's always not the proper time, and while the grass is growing, the horse is starving. So the point is, this Wage Advisory Committee has done extremely well, in my view, because they have not, gone to a point where it will be risky or irresponsible for our economy. So for example, my brother here to the right, he stated clearly that the rates proposed, the new rates, where we had conductors in 2011 working for $35 a day, that is preposterous. Nobody is doing that. Nobody's doing that. So the Wage Advisory Committee basically simply matched in the category of bus operators and so forth, what is the market rate at this current time, which is very, very responsible. So it has not, in my respectful view, put the operators on the back foot, and so they're scratching their head to say, where do I get the money to pay this or pay that? Actually, Mr. Kenzie here admitted, in some instances, more is paid above what is currently being scheduled. So I say all this to say I hear the concerns. We always had the classic theories of, this is going to drive up unemployment, this is going to put businesses out and so forth. But how this particular review was done in a tripartite system, I think it was done extremely responsibly. One, on that committee, you had employers' representatives. My brother here, Lydon Lewis, can speak to that. You have trade union representatives, and you have government representatives. And to a man, all the personnel on that committee believed that minimum wage, it needed to be adjusted. In fact, in terms of consultations, each and everybody, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, Hotel and Tourism Association, bus operators, solid waste, whoever was consulted, they were of the belief that it is necessitous for us to move past the 2011 schedule to a current schedule. So I hear the concerns, but all in all, I think the adjustments were done responsibly, and I think it's going to affect our economy in a very positive way.
Mr. Lewis, you're going to chime in on this when we come back. We're going to be taking a short break. We're talking minimum wages. We'll be right back.
Bring out the ham, bring out the lights, share the joy. It's time for Carols by Candlelight, the Rotary Club of Grenada's annual family fundraiser event on Sunday, 3rd December 2023 at Quarantine Point Recreational Park. Featuring three grand concerts with top artists and performers, including appearance from international guest artist Marcia Miranda. See the enchanting Monica Benoit Christmas Park. 1,000 gifts giveaway for the kids. Santa, local and international foods, wine lounge, fully stocked bar and kids lounge, family movies, holiday boutique store, fireworks display, and so much more. Get your tickets now. $10 for children, $45 regular, and more at the door. Tickets are available online at godefed.com, Grenadian Optical St. George, and Spiceland Mall, Gittins Drug Mart, or from any Rotarian. Get ready for Carols by Candlelight, Sunday, 3rd December, 4 p.m. until midnight. Follow on Facebook and Instagram for updates.
A Touch of Class, presented by Regan Mendez and friends. The music, the magic, a full choir, together with musicians, singers, dancers, and band, presenting a classical treat at the Gateway Center, Point Salim, on November the 19th at 7:30 p.m. A Touch of Class awaits you. Indulge in the classics from Carmen, Phantom of the Opera, and more. A musical evening filled with passion and excitement. A Touch of Class. Tickets are available at Côte-de-Fête and Grenadian Optical for only $75. A Touch of Class.
there are now 5, 10, 15-year survivors, even with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So if someone tells you just get your affairs in order and don't do anything, that's a mistake.
We need families who've been devastated by this disease to get on board so we can get more research and get to the cure.
Join us on Caribbean Medical TV right here on this station.
I want to control your anger. There's a way to feel better. That's one thing to remember. No matter where you are, you can be a star. Stop and take a deep breath and relax yourself. Take another deep breath and relax it, and relax it. Eliminate violence.
And welcome back. Of course, if you've just joined us, we're looking at minimum wages, and we've got our panelists here. Mr. Lewis, we're inviting you to chime in now. We've been talking about how well this is going to go down with employers. Is this going to be a tough thing for them? Because that huge jump from 2011 to now 2023, how are they able to make the adjustments? Your thoughts?
Thank you. As I said earlier, if we do things in a more systematic way, it sometimes alleviate the pressure. I think now it's going to be a balancing act. And one of the issues that we've had, and I don't think that the minimum wage would solve any of it, is that of productivity in our sector. And when I speak with employers, that has been one of their main concerns. How do we get our workers to produce? Because length of time on the job does not equals to output or productivity. And they have complained that they have seen an increase in ways and means of workers trying to if I may say, not be as productive as they should. Also, the issue of commitment to jobs. Some people go into a workplace just because they need a job, and they're not willing to put in anything extra that would help the organization to build its profits or build its portfolio or become more of an organization that can support the increase in wages. So whereas there would be companies or businesses that would need the manpower, whether or not the minimum wage is increased, there may be some that would have to rethink strategically how it would go about business, and how well would workers fit into new strategies that would lead to the survival of these businesses. So it's all encompassing. It's not just given just for the sake of the regulation that would be implemented. It is how workers can see that where they work, without it, they may be on the breadline, or how can they complement? Because businesses often rely on its workers to ensure that the benchmarks are met. And so if you're going to continue to, or if you're going to do the minimum wage, workers have to be prepared to give off a more committed, a more work-friendly environment that would allow businesses to survive in the not too distant future with these increases.
Yeah. Gentlemen, we've been talking over the years, and there have been the rallying for workers' rights, workers to be treated better. Let's let's just spend a couple of minutes here on the subject of productivity of workers. Now, I've got my own concerns because I think our work ethics in Grenada has not been necessarily very good. How do associations, unions, at least try to motivate and to ensure that productivity is at its highest level when it comes to workers delivering and getting equal or fair pay for a fair day's work? Either of you chime in, and then we'll go to Mr. Phillip.
Yeah, so most of the times you see unions in the media or wherever, you get the notion that it's all about gimme, gimme, gimme. In fact, for example, the union that I currently lead, the Public Workers Union, part of our constitution speaks to the impetus to enhance or to encourage workers towards productivity. So that is actually part of the trade union mandate. It's just not speaking of much. Now, in relation to this conversation that we're having about minimum wage, the minimum wage will, in my view, once it's adjusted properly, and I think the process has demonstrated that we're heading in the right direction, I think it will improve productivity. Pastor Worme, understand this. If you are underpaid, systematically underpaid for a number of years, how can you as a worker be motivated? Right? So you look on the other side of the fence. Once you see the system or your employer moves in a particular direction to improve your standard of living economically, that in itself is an incentive to be more productive. Yes, so I hear the talk all the time about the workers need to be more productive and so forth, but I think we have over the years in this country gone through a staring contest. So the workers are saying, man, you underpaying me. I'm just going to work for whatever, you know, whatever you paid me, I work to suit. And the employer says, you working for that? You given this sort of output? I have no impetus to increase your wages. So it's a staring contest. So I think both parties, respectfully, need to move simultaneously, right? And this is what we're seeing here with the minimum wage. And I think when it's all said and done, when it's all evaluated, I think we're going to come out on the other side realizing that continuous evaluation of the minimum wage will add to productivity in the country. That is my point of view on that.
Derek, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think employers have to motivate their employees. We have to look at your human resources as your biggest asset. And when your human resources are happy, you would find that your production would yield. When somebody coming to work or an employee coming to work and they're thinking about the mere salary that they're getting and it cannot really move them, can't go anywhere, there isn't that, joy to want to come to work. But we have to be a lot more creative and, making sure that our employees are comfortable by, making sure that they can meet their needs, their basic needs. And in so doing, you would find that something that they normally wouldn't do, they would, because you're reaching out to them. And I think that we need to lay more emphasis on that. Oftentimes, human resources are not treated well. And if we just get a little more creative, I think that could actually help in that regards.
Mr. Phillip, let's hear you. What says to thou?
To begin with, I do not believe that we have a structured approach. And when I say structured, I mean a joint structured approach to dealing with productivity issues in this country. I challenge any of you to go down to the Ministry or the Department of Labor or whatever the Labor Commissioner's office is called these days and see how many collective agreements you will find that addresses this notion of productivity in it. We seem to have come to a stage where we believe that increases increases to the wage, whatever the wage was, is a necessary thing that must occur every year. And we don't give two hoots as to the basis for that increase. Whether it is bonuses we are talking about, or whether it is shared basic wage, we are not giving any regard to output. For the union people who are well aware that prior to the worldwide introduction or spread, the worldwide spread of trade unionism, there was a notion of worker participation, worker councils that would address issues not just of safety, but also of output. And this is where one can tie in productivity concerns. And productivity concerns must be taken with a framework given due regard to safety. You cannot separate the notion of safety from the question of output. And until we have that as an institutionalized part of work, we spin it up inward. And how does one get there? How many of our supervisors and how many of our workers are familiar with concepts of job audits, right? The determinants of the elements of a job, and deciding that you are going to award so much points, so much money, or whatever it is, to physical effort, to intellectual effort, to physical conditions. How many jobs, how many job descriptions, in fact, are structured on the basis of that? And I could put it to you, it is not very many. And if you're dealing with actual collective agreements, this has not been an area in which trade unions in the past have given any serious significant interest to. However, while you have me on now, let me refer to a comment that was made by one of my fellow panelists before about a good job that the committee has done. The committee may have done a good job in consulting people. The recommendations, the two-page recommendations about moving what existed in 2011 by an average upward of almost upward of 40%. They give you no rationale for it, other than what people may have said in a consultation. And the bulk of the consultations have been attended by people who are dependent on somebody else for an income or for a wage. So they may have reflected the results of consultation, but I don't know the extent to which consultation reflected those who are required to pay, right, and those who are required to get work, as opposed to those who rely on others for providing them with work. I think that is a fundamental problem there.
Lydon, you there, aren't you?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, you really think that the ongoing discussion and, of course, the meeting of parties and trying to come to an amicable sort of arrangement in regards to wage increase, minimal wage emphasis, you think that you feel comfortable enough with where it headed and that there is a sense of fairness there?
I think, let me begin with one of the things that came out in a discussion I had with members of the committee that represents the Employers Federation or the employers, is that it must not be seen that while we are at the table with government discussing the minimum wage, that we are actually supportive in every aspect of the discussion. There would be areas that employers may see as a little disadvantage. However, legally and morally, we have an obligation to sit at the table. So I think there is this confusion that once you sit at the table with government, you agree with whatever, or not agree, let me not use agree, but you're part of government and part of what may government want to dictate in the discussion. So we need to get it clear. Two, there would be certain sectors that would be comfortable with some of the changes being made. And there'll be other sectors that would not be very comfortable. And I think from where I sit, one of the sectors is the care industry, and persons are saying that they almost have 100% increase, and that when you provide care for an elderly person, it is not one worker, sometimes it's two workers. So when you increase it, you're increasing it for the two workers. So there will be some sectors would be not be favorable with some of the recommendations made, and there will be some that would, of course, as the representative from the bus association says, that it may not affect them because they have already implemented certain aspects of the changes. So it's a balancing act. I think it's only when it hits the pockets of the employers, some employers, then you would hear the full story. So for now, when people are still doing the budgeting and they're getting used to the discussion and they're looking at how it would impact them, you may not hear much complaint. But when the actual implementation hits and the impact of the changes would have is settled, then I think that there may be room for a more robust discussion from employers.
Were there really amicable discussions involved? Was it very amicable? You were part of the
I'm not sure if it was very amicable, but what I show is that the employers' representatives, we were at the table and we were part of the discussion, and we continue to be part of the ongoing discussion. It's an ongoing process. We continue to get feedback from various sectors and from various members, and so as they come up, we would raise them with the committee and our members represented on the committee.
Brian, let's just shift a little bit. And how do we compare what's happening in Grenada with some of our regional brother-sister countries, as the case may be, whether it's an Antigua or Trinidad and Tobago? I think Trinidad and Tobago, they're moving from, 17 up to 24 by the 1st of January 2024. How do we compare what's happening in Grenada with that of some of our sister countries regionally?
Yeah, I think by and large, Grenada is ahead of the curve in light of the fact that St. Vincent does not have a minimum wage. St. Lucia does not have a minimum wage. So I think we are doing well in terms of where we are trying to get to as a country, in terms of really assisting the working class. Because we have to understand, most of the people affected by minimum wage are not represented by trade unions. They are from informal sector. We're talking about people who are working in Syrian stores will be positively affected by this, and that's quite large numbers, right? Most of the workers in this country are ununionized. So I think by and large we are ahead of the curve. But I want to address the productivity factor really quick, because the elephant in the room is supervision and management. A lot of the times we see that people, they are sent to positions of managers and so forth because they have gotten a degree, they have gotten their bachelors, they have gotten their masters, but management and supervision is a skill. Right? You have to be able to know how to psychologically extract the best from workers, how to motivate them. We see that a lot of the times, based on what I see, not all of the times, managers, they have the big stick approach, and in a country where salaries and so are not the best currently, that approach might have a regressive effect in terms of getting the best out of the worker. So what I would suggest sitting here is that more of our managers and supervisors are trained to be that. Not just the fact that they get a degree, but it's a particular specialized skill set, So I see this in the public sector. I'm sure it exists also in the private sector. The need for managers and supervisors to be trained properly, to do their jobs properly in order to get the most out of the workers they oversee.
Derek, you talked a bit about monitoring and how important that is. Would that be an easy task at all for that monitoring aspect of it? Okay, now let's look at this. Somebody may want a job, desperately need a job, and he or she is offered a job that is below the minimum wage, so to speak. Well, let's assume it's 9 for that particular area, and I say to them, well, you know, I could take you, but certainly not for 9. I'll take you for $6 per hour. And there is this desperation on the part of people who you really want a job. What's your thoughts about that? Who's going to monitor that? Who's going to look into it? Who's going to say, no, it can't happen?
Well, I think that's a good area where jobs can be created. So maybe we need a system in place with a team by the Ministry of Labor, or maybe they need to extend their staff or employ more people that can do that, because certainly there is a need for that. Somebody knowing that the rate is 9 and offering somebody 6 is definitely breaking the law. And I don't think we have room for that. And it's not fair.
Mind you, it's going to happen.
I believe it's going to happen. That's why it's a serious concern for me. And I just don't think it's fair with inflation, the cost of living that is that high, and you're trying to give employees a little cushion so that they can meet these high skyrocketing costs, and then you want to cut out of it. I just don't think it's fair. But there is something I needed to address. As mentioned a little earlier, that in terms of in our industry, yes, while we move past minimum wage, the $35 that was there, but at the same time there are a lot of people that are feeling the pinch, a lot of operators who are feeling the pinch, and not even in transportation alone. It happened in other sectors. If you travel through St. George's and go through some of the stores there, you would find that the people are screaming. It's really hard. And for us, we are operating at a 16-year-old price. Our bus fare being the same thing from 16 years plus. And then we have all these expenses that is coming onto us. And then while we agree that the minimum wage should increase, but at the same time you have to admit that it's a minimum, it's an expense that is increased because your revenue will increase there. Where the money coming from? Where the owners getting? If your revenue stream is the same thing, your cash flow is the same thing, and then you have to keep putting out. And at the same time, with cost of living going up, when we have to buy cleaning stuff, the gas price now is $17. It's really hard. So I think I like Mr. Ambrose's approach where, yes, we need to pay people, but at the same time, we have to look at the revenue stream and how it affects the actual employers too.
Brian, I noticed that there's a little twitch in your body there. seemed to suggest that you wanted to chime in.
No,
I'm going to just give you half a minute.
In regards to the enforcement aspect of it, I just want to use the opportunity to educate the public. That falls very strictly under the Ministry of Labor. So as my brother, Kenzie was saying here, I think based on the introduction of the new minimum wage schedule, I think the staffing in the Ministry of Labor needs to be increased. I think there needs to be additional training. So it's in law under Section 53 and 54 of the Employment Act. The employers are supposed to keep the schedule up there at their workplaces so it can be visible. So the labor officers will go out there and make sure that happens. And in the event that there is lack of compliance, there are sanctions in place. For example, you not paying the proper minimum wage, you can have fines of 5,000 on the first instance, second instance 10,000, then you have to pay the difference to the employee plus interest. So all in all, regarding that enforcement aspect, the Ministry of Labor will have to beef up, and I expect the administration is keenly aware of that, and they will do whatever it takes to put things in place to get more workers in there to go out and look to ensure that the act or the legislation is properly followed.
Does the Ministry of Labor have a good history in monitoring?
I'll pass the buck.
Well, Steve is going to pass it, because I think that's a very important question that we might just look a little bit into when we come back. It's 9:30. We're going to take a quick break. We've got another half an hour, and when we come back, we'll be opening up the line 440-1252, so we'll be expecting you to call in. We'll be right back.
Ready. A new season of the Grenada debates is coming. Informative, impromptu, bright young minds sparking powerful ideas. The Grenada debates, September 2023. Tune in.
I want to tell you something amazing.
I am Nexa. And when I say Nexa, I mean more than just another financial institution. We're a family. We're a community.
A community that listens and values your voice in every decision we make.
Big financial decisions can be daunting, but Nexa is a strong support system here to guide you every step of the way.
Nexa believes in empowerment, but you are never alone.
We're with you wherever your road leads.
Whether it's owning my first home, educating my kids, or starting a business, Nexa is where I am following my dreams.
And here's the exciting part. You can be part of this incredible journey too. Just join today.
I am Nexa, and you can be too. We're making it even better to be a Nexa member. Ask a friend who's already a member to refer you. Our members refer someone, and both of you can enjoy special rewards. It's a win-win. Call us at 440-1354. Visit us on our social media or our website for how to join.
Nexa Credit Union, with you wherever your road leads.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
And welcome back. Just in case you've just joined us, we're looking at the subject matter minimum wage. We were just talking, in fact, before the break about the whole idea of monitoring and how important it is for the Ministry of Labor to play a very important role. Let me ask you, Lydon, and then we're going to go to Mr. Phillip. Do you think that the Ministry of Labor, they've had the sort of workforce and the strong enough staff to look at it and monitor that? Just hold on a bit, because we've got a caller first. After the caller, we're going to go back to you. Caller, good evening. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Good evening, Pastor, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Right, good evening to your guest. I'll tell you, I know Mr. Phillip And I think I respect him much more. Not only a serious man, but a wise man. I cannot agree with him more in terms of everything that he said, because that is the problem. That is the problem, and maybe the solution to the problem. You're chasing wages without an economy. And this thing, I spoke about this years before. That was my song. Grow the economy, pertinent to creating jobs. And so we allow this thing to lapse for so many years. Cost of living has risen, and now we're chasing cost of living with wages. It will not work. It will not work. Could the economy take that? Could the business people absorb that? Do we know the financial position? Many of them is operating on the overdraft. Are we asking them to reduce staff, go to business, or cut their business in some ways? That is what I've seen on the horizon. I see disaster there. I will suggest that the government engage the sectors as I requested in the past. The chamber, the trade union, the banks, and government sit down as four bodies with white paper and discuss a way and strategy to grow the economy markedly, to create wealth, so we could pay people well, and then we might be in a position to pay increased salary, but we don't